Welcome everyone to the session on Java today. This is Keshav and we'll be starting with data types and variables in today's class. So we are going to look upon the terms like data types and variables. What exactly these things are and how exactly these things are used in Java. So here you can see that I have created a project for you all. The name of our project is demo project, and in my earlier video I have already told you how to create a project, right? So you can refer to that particular video if you have any doubts regarding how to create a project. And in that project I have made a class called as demo class. So we have main method here as well. What is a method? We'll discuss in the later videos. Right now our concern is what is data types and variables. So let us start with variables first. So what comes into your mind when we talk about the term variables? Yeah, I used variables when I was quite small, when I was in my school period or during my engineering days as well. I used to use the term variables for, you can say, referring to some particular value, right? We used variables to say that, okay, this variable refers to some particular value. The meaning of variables was that the value can change, the value can vary. That is the reason why we call it as variables, because the values may vary. So here as well, the variables, you can say, refer to the same thing. Variables are generally considered as the containers which contain some information. What type of information? That we will be seeing later on, but yeah, they contain some kind of information. Those things, we call it as variables here as well. And why do we call it as variables? Because here also you can change the values. So what are variables? I would say containers. Containers which contain some information. Okay, that is what variables are. So let's talk about data types. I would like to ask you a very simple question. What comes to your mind when I say something like 12, 13, 54, 75? I would say it is numbers, isn't it? You would also say the same, that these are numbers. Similarly, what comes to your mind if I'll say, hey, how are you? How was your day? So you'll say that, yeah, these things are sentences. So we were given the right kind of education from the very beginning of our days, and that is the reason why we are able to differentiate between different types of information, isn't it? We can say, we said that numbers are a different kind of informations, sentences, words are a different kind of information. So we are able to process these things internally because we were taught in this way from the very starting. But we need to make our compilers or our computers also understand these things, isn't it? Because they also need to know that, okay, what type of information you're going to use. So to make our compilers or to make our computers understand that what kind of information you are using, we use different types of data types. Now there are various types of data types which have been defined in Java. We have integers, we have string, we have float, we have double. They have been defined in such a way that they refer to some different kinds of information. That is what data types are. So if I'll want to write the definition of data types, I would write it as the types of information available in today's world. Or I have just given you a very basic definition of what a variable and a data type is. Let's try to understand this thing further. So I said that variables are something which can store information, right? So in computers, what exactly happens is, let's say you want to use the number 12. So you will be having a space in RAM where you can store this particular number 12 which you want to use in your code. Again, I would like to explain you this thing. Let's say I am going to use the number 12. So I need to store it somewhere, right? The compiler will be giving us the memory in our RAM where we can store this digit 12. Now we need to call that memory location by a name, isn't it? We need to call that memory location by something. Otherwise, how will we use it, isn't it? Like again, if let's say everybody in today's world has a particular name, right? Everybody has a name. My name is Keshav, your name is, let's say, someone, right? So everybody has been given a name through which they are called. In a similar way, whatever value you store in your code, you need to call it with some name. And that exactly is what a variable is. Okay, so variable will be referring to the particular memory location where your data will be saved. If I'll show you a picture here, you can see in this picture that the orange box which I have made here is called as the RAM. The value 12.34 is being referred to by a letter called as A. So A will be our variable. Why? Because it is pointing directly to the value 12.34. So in Java, What are variables? Variables are something which refer to the memory location where the data is getting stored. That is what a variable is, right? But we need to define the data type of that particular value or information which is being stored as well. Because different memory locations are provided for different kind of values. Getting the point? If you will see this picture again, you will see that for integer, the box is little bit smaller. For decimals, the box is little bit bigger. And for sentences, it is overall again much bigger than the previous two boxes, right? So different types of informations take different types of spaces, isn't it? Digit 18 will be taking some different space than what this sentence will take, isn't it? So that is the reason why we need to define the data type so that the compiler can give us the proper piece of memory from our RAM. And that is the overall reason why we need to define a data type as well. Okay. So let us try to define a variable and put up some value in our variable. And through that itself, we'll be able to understand that how to define a data type or how to create a variable, right? Okay. So let us take a very simple example here. Let's say we are going to talk about an integer. Okay. We are going to talk about an integer today. The value of which we will be using in our code will be, let us say 20. We have to use 20. Now how to define the variable or how to define what data type this particular thing is? We will have to write down the data type of the particular value which we need to store. So if I'm going to say 20, I think this will be coming under integers, right? Integers. So I'll be saying the data type first, then the name of the variable comes next. So our variable name can be anything. I can say vname, and then we have to store the value in particular variable which we have declared right now. So I'm going to say, yeah, it has to be 20. And after that, you're going to give a semicolon. So in this way, you can see that I have defined or I have declared a variable which is storing the information 20. But I have given the data type of that particular variable as well. Now you will have many doubts in your mind right now. I know that because most of you will be thinking that how or why did I write int? So you all can make up that, okay, this might be an integer and that is the reason why I am writing int. So you might be having other doubts as well, like what are the other types of data types which are available in Java, isn't it? So let us try to look up on all of them one by one. Now basically in Java we have two main kinds of data types. One of them is called as primitive and the second one of them is called as non-primitive. What are primitive data types? The data types which are already built in. The data types which have been defined already are called as primitive data types. Now what are non-primitive data types? Data types which the user creates by himself is called as non-primitive data types. So I'll say this is user defined. So in Java there are totally 8 primitive data types. Means there are 8 data types which have been predefined and there are various non-primitive data types which are also defined. Now let's look upon all of those 8 data types which are there in Java. So you all can see here that these are the data types which are listed with their various memory allocations. Means a particular data type takes this much amount of memory if we are defining it. So you can see that I have defined exactly 8 data types here, isn't it? We start with short, which takes around 2 bytes. Then we have byte, which takes around only 1 byte. Then we have char, which take 2 bytes. So let us discuss about each of these one by one. What is short? Short generally takes numerical data types. Let's say short A is equals to 34. Similarly, it goes for byte as well. Then we have something called as char. Char basically takes only a single character. It can be an alphabet, it can be a number, it can be a symbol as well, but it should be only one. And it should always be represented by single quotes. Meaning, if I have to declare a character here, I would simply write down char C is equals to A. This is what char is. Or if I'll change this value, I can say this will also work out. So it can be anything, char. Then we have int. So integer always, int means integer. Integer means 0 to infinity and 0 to negative of infinity. All the numbers can be stored inside int. Then we have long. Long I would say is a parent of int. Int basically takes integers, but it can take it up to 4 bytes of memory, whereas long takes till 8 bytes of memory. Similarly, we have float. Now float is a little bit different thing. Why? Because float takes decimals. And similarly, double is the parent of float. It can store bigger values than float. So let's say I have to go for, so I'll say float f is equals to 12.34. You can see it is throwing a error. Basically, you have to add an f to make the compiler understand that this is a float, or you're going to use a float data type for storing this particular decimal. Otherwise, Java automatically stores all the decimal values in double. And that is the reason it was giving an error. If you would have written double d is equals to 56.65, this wouldn't have shown any error. See, it is not showing any error. But if you do the same with float, it will always give an error because Java automatically considers double. So I hope till here everything is fine for you all. You can see that these are the various types of data types which we are going to use. But all these data types are built in, means they are primitive data types. What can be an example of non-primitive data type? If I'll go ahead, so we have a very big example of non-primitive data type. The thing we generally call as string. So I will say string s is equals to, you all I think understand what string takes. If you don't know what string stores, then I would say this words or the sentences in Java are stored under this category. So string basically stores all the words or all the sentences or whatever you want to store. So if I'll be writing something like how are you today, that can be stored in string. Now remember one thing always, that if you are going to use a string, you always have to use double quotes. You cannot use single quotes because single quotes are for characters. And I can say that this is the user defined data type. How? So guys, you can see that this string is user defined data type. It is a class which has been defined in Java by someone who was actually developing this whole language, right? Now I think the concept of data types and variables are more so clear to you. Let us see some examples here. Let's try to add two variables today. So I'll write a simple program how to add two variables. So let's say we take up an integer called as a. I'll say integer a is equals to, which holds the value 10. Next thing which I'll be writing will be integer b is equals to 100. So I'm taking up two integers whose values are respectively 10 and 100. So how does this work? 10 is stored in RAM in a particular area which is being called by the name a. Similarly, it goes for b, right? And what kind of area? The integer area. Now let's say I'm going to write an integer, or I'm going to define another variable c, whose value will be the addition of a and b. So when we add the values which is represented by a and b respectively, then we are going to store it in c. Okay, basically we are going to call that location as c, wherever it is getting stored. Let's try to print out this particular result. In the console window, you all can see the result, which is 110. So this was a very simple example of adding two integers, of addition of two integers. This is how variables and data types are written in Java. You also have another way to define a variable in Java. I am going to define, or I'm going to just declare the variable in the first line. I would say int vname, and that's it. I'm just declaring the variable. I haven't given it any value. Got it? I haven't given it any value till now. In the next line, I'm going to write down vname equals to 70. So now your vname has been given a value, but that has been given in line number 11. In line number 10, we have just declared the variable, calling it as vname, and we are saying that it should contain always an integer value. So these are the two ways in which you can actually define a variable. You can play with them, you will be doing many sorts of things with these variables, right? And in our later videos, we'll be using variables and data types more so everywhere. That is, you can say, the basic building block of Java. And I would say that you have successfully covered the first video here, and for the next videos you can just click on the link below so that you can go ahead with the next session. Thank you all for joining today. Have a good day. Bye bye.